Chapter 6, Disaster. "We have to save all of Venice," said Jack. "That's a big responsibility. What do we have to save Venice from?" "Well, if Neptune's going to help us, it must have something to do with water," said Annie. "Yeah, like the water that's flooding the alleys," said Jack. "But the woman at the cafe told us not to worry about that," said Annie. "I'm still worried," said Jack. "Let's look up floods in our Venice book." He found floods in the index. He turned to the right page and read, "Most of the time, high water in Venice is not serious. But if several conditions are present at the same time, a flood disaster can occur." "A flood disaster? That must be it," said Annie. "So, what are the conditions?" "It lists them here," said Jack. He read, "A high tide, strong winds from the south, heavy flow of water from the mountains, severe storms at sea." "There's a high tide tonight. The passenger with the bird mask in the gondola told us that," said Annie. "Yeah, and winds from the south. The weather vane told us that," said Jack. "And water's flowing down from the mountains. The woman at the cafe told us that," said Annie. "Yeah, and storms out at sea. I saw lightning when we crossed the water," said Jack. "All the conditions are here," said Annie. Jack and Annie looked around. Water was now flowing steadily from the alleyways into the small square. It had risen above their ankles. "I get it now," said Jack. "The water will just keep getting higher and higher until it destroys the whole city, and no one's paying attention." "Neptune's the only one who can help us stop the flood," said Annie. "But Neptune's not real," said Jack. "I mean, he's a character in mythology, and mythology's not real life. It's—" Okay, said Annie. "Let's just take one step at a time. At midnight, 2 guys will tell us the time, and then we should climb to the top of their tower, right?" "Right," said Jack. "So what we have to do now is find those 2 guys," said Annie. "Let's go back to the waterfront," said Jack. "The man with the dog said everyone in Venice would be there for the fireworks." Jack put away their book. Then he and Annie retraced their steps over the footbridge and back through the alleys. Lots of seaweed was floating in the narrow lanes between buildings. "Water is definitely flowing in from the sea," Jack thought. When they got back to St. Mark's Square, people were streaming toward the waterfront. Jack and Annie walked with the crowd. Everyone was talking and laughing as they looked up at the sky over the water, waiting for the fireworks to begin. No one paid attention to the damp winds or the seawater spilling over the side of the canal, soaking their shoes. "Excuse me," Annie shouted. "Can anyone tell us the time?" No one answered, for just then the first explosion of fireworks shook the night. The crowd cheered as blue and red showers exploded in the sky. In the distance, a clock started to chime. Jack counted the bongs. 12, he said. "It's midnight now, according to that clock." More fireworks exploded over the waterfront, and another clock began clanging. This time, Jack counted only 11 bongs. He shook his head. "This is crazy," he muttered. Jack looked around at the crowd. "Can anyone tell us the real time?" he yelled. "Is it midnight yet? Can anyone tell us?" No one answered, not even one man. Much less 2. Everyone was oohing and awing over the dazzling fireworks. Another clock began to sound. This one was much louder than the first 2. Bong! "This is hopeless," said Jack. Bong! "We'll never know the right time," he said. Bong! "Jack, look over there," said Annie. Bong! "We'll never find the 2 men with the tower," said Jack. Bong! "Jack, look," said Annie. Bong! "All of Venice is about to drown in a flood," said Jack. Bong! "And everyone's just cheering for fireworks," said Jack. Bong! "Jack, look," said Annie. She pointed toward the clock tower in St. Mark's Square. Bong! Jack saw a huge bell on top of the tower. 2 bronze statues were holding a club and striking the bell. Bong! The statues were of 2 men. Bong! "At midnight, 2 men will tell you the time," said Annie. Bong! The 2 men struck the bell for the 12th time and then stopped. "Come on," cried Jack. "We have to climb that tower." More fireworks thundered over the canal as Jack and Annie pushed their way back through the crowd. They ran into St. Mark's Square and splashed their way to the tall tower with the 2 men on top. They ran to the arched entrance of the tower and stepped inside. The air was damp and musty. "Stairs!" said Jack. He ran to a dark, winding stairway and started up. Annie followed. They climbed and climbed until they reached the top of the tower. Jack was breathing hard as he pushed open a heavy door that led out onto the bell terrace. The two statues were frozen on either side of the bronze bell. As soon as Jack and Annie stepped onto the terrace, the wind blew their hats off their heads. The air was filled with cracking and hissing sounds as more fireworks burst through the sky. Everyone on the waterfront was clapping and cheering. "What's the next thing Merlin tells us to do? To find Neptune?" Annie shouted. Jack pulled out Merlin's letter. Holding on to it tightly as it flapped in the wind, he read aloud. "The king of the jungle will carry you there, not over land, but high in the air." "The king of the jungle is a lion," said Annie. "So it sounds like we need to find a flying lion." "Right," said Jack, "but where?" "How about that one?" said Annie. She was pointing over the terrace railing. Jack looked down. Standing on the wide ledge below was the stone statue of a lion. Growing out of the lion's back were two powerful-looking carved wings. "But that's just a statue," cried Jack. "How can a statue take us anywhere?" Annie grinned. "I think it's time to use a little more magic," she said.